Take-home lesson is that your IP address connection information is retained across the board at companies. Microsoft keeps it for 60 days, AOL keeps it for 90 days, MySpace for a year, Time Warner for 6 months. Companies all have these policies. They all have established policies for how long they keep data and when they delete it. But they don't tell their customers about these policies. The one area where they do tell their customers is in the search engine space. So over the last couple of years, European regulators have been beating up the search engines and pushing them to start deleting IP address data. In response, all have moved, right? So Microsoft now deletes the entire IP address from their logs after 6 months. Yahoo anonymizes some of their logs. After 3 months, they keep a second set for security purposes that only a few engineers have access to, but that can still be subpoenaed up until 6 months. And then Google does a really shitty job of anonymizing their data. They delete the last octet of the IP address at 9 months. So like 1 in 255. Google is not doing a good job in this space, but they're all anonymizing their logs after a certain number of months. Well, does this matter? No. So Google's head privacy lawyer spoke to Wired in 2007 and basically said that when law enforcement comes for data, they come a couple days after the searches were done. Right? So deleting the data at 6 months, at 9 months, at 1 month, it doesn't really matter, because when law enforcement is coming, the companies have the full data in their possession. What about Microsoft? Well, they were asked by the New York Times a couple of years ago why they wouldn't adopt zero data retention. And Microsoft said, too much privacy is actually dangerous. Anonymized search can become a haven for child predators. And we want to make sure that users have control and choices, but at the same time, we want to provide a security balance. Well, I don't really want my service provider to be striking that balance. I want them to be deleting the data on day one, or to not keep it in the first place. But you should think about this. When companies say, we protect your privacy, we care about your privacy, we put your privacy first, then they're making these statements and cutting these deals behind closed doors. Right? So when companies talk about putting your privacy first, what they're talking about is putting your commercial privacy first. We won't share your data with third parties. We won't sell your data. None of them consider their relationship with the government to be part of that aspect of privacy. So one interesting thing is that when companies have these data retention policies, and they don't talk about the data retention policies, when they change the number of months after which they keep the data, no one knows. Right, so these are screenshots from MySpace's law enforcement handbook, which they publish and compile and give to any law enforcement official in the country. You can see that in 2006, they kept 90 days worth of logs, and in 2007, they kept 1 year of logs. So they massively multiplied the length at which they keep data, and they never told their customers. The reason is their privacy policy doesn't include this stuff. Their privacy policy says, we will provide your data, in certain circumstances, we protect your privacy, we value your privacy, blah, 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 but they don't actually include the important details. The place those details are listed are in the law enforcement handbooks, but they don't share with their customers. All right, so there are also these non-technical methods by which companies can protect your privacy, and companies do differ in these ways, right? So not every company is the same in the way that they respond to requests. Emergency requests. All right, so we have requests that come with court orders, we have requests that come with subpoenas, that come with some legal process, and we have these emergency requests. And what this means is that the law says that if a provider in good faith believes that an emergency involving danger of death or serious physical injury to any person requires disclosure or delay of communications relating to the emergency. So what this means is that the feds or local police can go to an ISP and say, someone's going to die, we need this person's data. It sounds reasonable, right? You don't want to stop the investigation in its tracks. Well, when you have two paths, one with high work and one with low work, everything shifts to the low work track. And so suddenly there are lots and lots of emergencies. So how many are there? A huge fucking amount. So of the approximately 90,000 requests that Verizon receives from government agencies each year, 25,000 are emergency requests. These are requests that have no court order, no subpoena, no search warrant, no oversight at all. This is a police officer calling them up or writing a fax saying someone's going to die. And the ISPs don't even have to learn about the circumstances. They can take the police on their word. So the important thing is here that the feds are not actually submitting loads of emergency requests to Verizon. They're all from state and local law enforcement. So like missing person in the woods, or a murder or something. I don't know what the cases are, because unfortunately, because there's no court order, there's also no paper trail to follow up. So we have no idea what these emergencies are. It's important to note that a voluntary disclosure means a voluntary disclosure, right? So according to the Internet Service Providers Association, which represents all the big ISPs, there is never an emergency obligation on an ISP to disclose. The ISP has the right to tell the government to get lost and to come back with a warrant. They can, and in some cases the ISPs do. There is a process by which the police can wake a judge up at 2 in the morning and get him to sign a court order. I know because they did one and used it to break into my house. They can call up a magistrate over the phone and he'll issue the order by fax. It can take half an hour. So this isn't a serious issue. But very few ISPs actually say no. All right, so a company's policy on emergency requests is one of the most important indicators regarding its overall commitment to privacy, because this is an area where they can actually say no. When they get a court order or they get a search warrant, there's nothing they can really do. The warrant is, if it's valid, they have to disclose the data. But when it's a voluntary request, the ISP can put their foot down. But we don't know how many say no because they don't talk about it. This is like an area of uber secrecy. Because the ISPs think that if customers find out that they're doing this, that they will not entrust them with their data. Maybe for good reason. All right, well, what about the cost? Right? So nothing is free in this world. Companies are legally permitted to pass along the cost of surveillance to the government. This includes labor, capital costs, including associated with hardware and software, the development of the wiretapping systems. As an example, Sprint has 100 employees doing nothing but wiretapping their customers and providing their customers call records and location and other stuff. That isn't free, right? Those folks all have salaries. What's interesting is that these companies charge on a regular basis, and actually right now several big ISPs are under investigation by the Department of Justice for overcharging the government. Again, because we don't know how much they're charging. All right, so this is some information that came out of a report a couple of years ago. This details the prices for different ISPs. It's tough to read, but basically you can see that the average cost of an intercept is between $1,500 and $2,500. They're charging big bucks for these intercepts. Not everyone charges, though. So MySpace, Facebook, and Microsoft don't charge at all. They've decided that they would like to help the government in any way they can. So they just give the information for free. Well, is it good or bad that these companies are charging? Well, so there are actually some benefits to the public when ISPs charge. This is, again, a telecommunications lawyer Al Godari speaking. When records are free, law enforcement overconsumes with abandon. But when service providers charge for extracting data, law enforcement requests are more tailored. Also, when you charge, there's an invoice, there's a check, there's a paper trail. And so over the last couple of years, I've been filing FOIA requests to get the invoices. So you can see here that Google charges $25 for your email account. It's pretty interesting to know. Also, Yahoo charges $20.39 or $20.41. What's the difference between those two numbers? The increase in the cost of a stamp. Yahoo is passing on the cost of a stamp to the government for every time they hand over your data. I think this is pretty cool, actually. All right, so as I said before, all of these ISPs have surveillance manuals in which they detail their policies, their costs, everything else. They provide sample subpoenas so that the police don't have to spend as much time writing up the requests. Many of these surveillance manuals have leaked onto the internet recently. I've got copies of them. They're really interesting. You can see them all at cryptome.org. That's where they're all hosted. This is my favorite. This is Sprint surveillance manual. You can check out the awesome clip art.
Thankfully, folks, other companies are pitching in, like Yahoo, who is currently facing a Freedom of Information suit that seeks to learn how much money they made selling their customers' private information to the feds. They are fighting this suit because, according to their lawyer, the information, if disclosed, would be used to shame Yahoo and other companies and to shock their customers. I, for one, am shocked. Does Yahoo still have customers?
So, there's always this talk about bloggers ripping off the mainstream media, and I don't know if Stephen Colbert counts as the mainstream media, but both that Sprint recording and this FOIA request that he's citing are mine, and he didn't mention my name on the air, so I think it's totally appropriate that I then use a clip of his without paying for it. All right, so we know that ISPs differ on privacy. We know that some fight more requests than others. We know that some go out of their way to help the government. I think it's interesting to note that Yahoo's surveillance manual showed up on Cryptome, which is a website. Yahoo sent a cease and desist. Then a few weeks later, Microsoft's surveillance manual showed up on Cryptome, and Microsoft really went hardcore after Cryptome and had the site shut down. Their upstream ISP pulled the connection for a little while. These companies don't want their surveillance manuals getting out because it makes them look bad, right? They're spilling all the goods and describing all the ways in which the government can get your data and the prices they charge. This is damning stuff. But I really recommend that you look through these because it's really interesting. All right, so from this information, though, maybe we can do a little bit of analysis and say, well, which ISPs suck the least? Which ISP is not going to totally violate your privacy? All right, so let's start with Sprint. Sprint retains their IP address logs and the URLs viewed for 2 years, and they provided 8 million GPS pings to law enforcement in 1 year. I don't think these guys are very good, so I wouldn't recommend using Sprint. Verizon, when sued by EFF for assisting in the warrantless wiretapping program, actually went to court and argued that they had a First Amendment right to disclose their customers' communications to the government. They believe they have a free speech right to share your information. So screw Verizon. What about AT&T? One word. All right, so sort of by process of elimination, T-Mobile is the largest reasonable communications carrier. They use NAP, they have no IP logs to keep, they don't retain the URLs that you view, and at least I haven't found any public materials that indicate they went along with the NSA warrantless wiretapping program. They very well may have, but they didn't get caught doing it, which is more than I can say for the other two big service providers. Also, it's important to know that prepaid phones are your friend. There's a bill in Congress right now to try and ban the use of prepaid SIM cards. Hasn't gone through yet, so I recommend that you buy several SIM cards and share them with your friends. It is important to note that companies do differ on privacy, and they don't want to talk about why they differ. In many cases, they're apologetic for the ways they differ, but you can significantly impact and protect your own privacy by intelligently picking your service provider, your email provider, by using an encrypted cloud service rather than one that data mines your information and serves you ads. I would like that that you be able to walk into Best Buy, and in addition to comparing who has the sexiest new phone or who has the cheapest prices, that you could actually compare, who fights law enforcement requests the most or who keeps the least amount of data. We don't have that yet, but hopefully we will in the near future. Thank you.